Roll call done.
Yep, the recording started.
Josh, I just forwarded the Brian Hume didn't get the invite, so I just forwarded that to him.
Oh, it looks like he's coming in now.
Oh, there he is.
Good evening.
Good evening, Brian. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coordinating this.
No problem at all. Thanks for presenting tonight and getting us caught up to speed. Since
Brian,
it
can you
looks
hear me?
like talking to me, Michael. We can hear you, Michael.
I don't think he can hear us.
Oh,
He just sent me this link, so he might be wondering if I got it.
you want to get the roll call, Josh, out of the way?
Yeah, sure. Just make sure. It looks like we had one more person join, Peter.
Okay.
Make sure I get my hand here. Okay, Matt,
Yes.
Casey,
Present.
Michael, McDermott,
Yeah.
Thomas,
Yes.
Norman,
Yes.
and Peter. Peter is muted.
Matt,
Peter's-
I have an
Peter's
opportunity.
iPad muted.
Matt, can I share my screen tonight?
Yep, no problem at all. Josh will take care of that for you.
Yep, you should be all set.
Okay, perfect. And then we'll do the next, public comment. If there's anybody from the public that has anything that they'd like to say related to the fire building subcommittee, just let it be known, either raise your hand or just unmute. It looks like we only have Carlton Hunt. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to next new business. So it's going to be an update on the feasibility phase, space needs assessment, Brian Hume. So we'll go ahead and give you control.
Thank you. Again, thanks for coordinating this. It's an opportunity for me to kind of bring you up to speed on where we've brought the project so far and remind you of what our tasks were going forward. Under our contract, we have a 4-phased approach to this feasibility study. The first component to that was a space needs assessment. The second component is a site evaluation or sites to be evaluated. The third component would be schematic design. And that would be putting together floor plans, elevations, site plans of a chosen solution. And then the fourth component, probably the one that everybody wants to know the most about, is cost estimates. And we will do a cost estimate and tell you how much we're anticipating, not just the construction to be, but also soft cost contingency for a total project cost. So we're in still the first phase. In our contract agreement is written that the owner has to give us approval to go to the next phase. So we're at a point now working with the fire department, and we feel we have a pretty good draft put together of a space needs assessment. But the space needs assessment really has to be vetted by you as the town, you as a committee, you as a town, to say, is this the report that is going to then generate the next step, which would be a site evaluation, or the next step being a schematic design. We don't really want to go forward with something if there's any questions about what's being proposed. We'd rather get it right in the space needs assessment phase, make sure everybody's in agreement that it looks right, feels right, sounds right, know the direction that you're sending us off on. Because every time we might have to loop back and go back to an earlier phase, that might cost everybody time and money. So we have it budgeted that we do this in a sequential process. So everybody knows what the process is. So we're excited to share with you what we have for a space needs assessment. We could have not have done this in a vacuum. We've done this with a lot of assistance from the fire department themselves. The chief, the deputy chief, captains were involved. Renee, the administration, has been involved. We've been doing this with a series of phone calls and reports back and forth through emails. So I believe that I'm speaking for the fire department when I'm showing you this space needs assessment. If there's something from the fire department that doesn't seem right, they have an opportunity to say, whoa, wait a minute, let's not present this any further. And we're fine to go back and revise it. The same is true for you as a committee or for the town. If there's anything that doesn't look right, feel right, we are more than happy to go back into the space needs assessment and really make it what everybody feels is appropriate for Bridgewater. So if I can share my screen.
Yep, you should be all set.
Everybody can see this title sheet. This draft has been forwarded to the fire department a number of weeks ago. It's also been forwarded to Michael for the town. I think it's the first time you might be seeing it as a building committee. It's dated September 20th, 2020, and it has a big draft on the front of it. The only reason it says draft is because you haven't seen it yet, or you haven't had the opportunity to vet this yet. It's a draft until you tell me it's not a draft. Well, first I'd like to explain what's included within the space needs assessment itself. The table of contents gives you the information that first we have general information. We have indicated growth estimates for both the town and for the department. We have put together calls for service projections into the year 2030 and 2040. And we've also looked at personnel, how it's affected, and also apparatus, how it's affected from 2030 to 2040, and looking at all those estimates. The bulk of the space needs assessment is actually the assessment itself. It's been divided into a Bridgewater Fire Headquarters that you see here with 21 individual components of fire headquarters. And then it says down here, Bridgewater Fire Stations number 2 and number 3. And it has now 15 components for Bridgewater Fire Stations 2 and 3. It concludes with a space needs summary. And then we have some exterior considerations. So right there, let me explain what we're talking about. Bridgewater Fire Service is now being handled through a headquarters and a Station 2. Station 2 would be called East Station, or some people would refer to Station 2 as Pratttown Station. That's in place. That's servicing the east side of town. In conversations with the fire personnel, and this is primarily through the fire chief, Chief Levy, who I've mentioned to the town administrator that this guy really bleeds Bridgewater. When I talk to him and when he discusses Bridgewater, you can tell there's quite a history that he has with this town. And if he was to do this project and recommend something to the town, it would be that Bridgewater would be supplemented with a station on the west side of town. And we've just labeled that as Station 3. Some people might call it a west side station. Some people might refer to it as, and the fire department has referred to it as the Scotland Station. So just as the fire headquarters is serving downtown, Station 2 is serving the east side of town. There seems to be a lot of development and a lot of things happening on the west side of town. So fire service and response times to the west side needs to be supplemented, and they feel it's going to be supplemented in the best fashion if a similar substation is located on the west side of town or in the Scotland area to service the fire needs and fire calls in Station 3, similar to what's happening in Station 2. So this really started a fundamental question that we had with the fire service of, you have so much apparatus right now. You're planning for apparatus for 2030 and 2040, which is not a lot of increase, by the way. But how do you want to distribute vehicles across Bridgewater? If we're looking to do a space needs assessment, and we're just looking at a headquarters in Station 2, it would require that all the apparatus be housed in the headquarters or Station 2. But in further conversations, it really felt that it really needed to be Station 2, Station 3, and headquarters to properly service Bridgewater into the future. So that's the way we've developed the space needs assessment. Now, I do have to say, if there's a site during site evaluation that we look at, and that site satisfies the west side of town, also satisfies the service needs for the center of town, Station 2 is covering the east side of town, it could be that a site could be found that could consolidate headquarters in Station 3 into one facility. But then again, site evaluation phase, which is the next phase, might show us that there's a great headquarters location. There's a great location in the Scotland area for Station 3, and then maintaining Station 2 where it is on the east side of town may show that distribution of apparatus across those 3 locations may serve the town better, and building 2 facilities of a certain size instead of building 1 facility of a combined size. So we're looking at this to say, we're not saying that we need 3 facilities, but we need to satisfy the needs that are shown here for headquarters, and we need to satisfy the needs that are shown here for Station 3. The only reason that this is saying Station 2 and Station 3 is because those needs are similar. Station 2 currently is not brought up to the standards that are in this space needs assessment. But Station 2 may have future needs that would be supplemented by what this space needs assessment says. This is primarily for looking at what the headquarters needs and what the needs would be on the west side of town, leaving the Station 2 in its current configuration, current staffing, current size for now. So any questions that you have right now, or if I confused everybody completely? Or I'll continue.
I'm good, Brian.
All right, I'm going to continue. And the way I'm going to continue is I'm actually going to do this a little bit in reverse. I'm going to jump to the space needs summary on page 28, because I think I can then work in reverse order. I want you to understand what the summary is. Everybody like the cost estimate? Everybody wants to jump to the last number. In the space needs summary, everybody wants to know what's the size. So I'm going to do that. So on page 28, here's what everybody might want to know and quickly get to, is we took those categories for the Bridgewater Fire Headquarters, and we're showing public spaces, 880 square feet. Now, the way we derived the space needs assessment, we talked at length with the fire personnel and the administrative staff, and we asked them questions such as, what is it that you see you need to service the public we never asked them the question, how many square feet do you need? But when they gave us answers such as we need a lobby, we need public restrooms, we need a vestibule, we need our lobby to do this, we need our restrooms to do this. I put the square footage number on the description. So the square footage numbers that you see are all derived from our office, our experience doing fire facilities, and our experience doing public safety projects. We drive the square footage numbers. The fire department has driven the descriptions. So in total, these are all net square footages, and I end up with a net total of 18,630 net square feet. Net square footage is all those dimensions within the space. So if the room has a 10 by 10 dimension within the walls, it's 100 square feet. But now I have to take the net square footage and convert it to a gross calculation. There are some industry standards for this. The way I do it for fire facilities is I look at the apparatus bays, and because the apparatus bays are pretty much big, wide open spaces, there are not a lot of walls and a lot of things to go increase it from net to gross. So apparatus bays, I have 6,585 square feet of net square footage. So I take that number and I just increase it by 10% to add 660 square feet going from net to gross. For the other spaces, offices, I have a lot of walls, I have corridors, I have exterior wall thicknesses, and an industry standard is 1.35 multiplier to go from net to gross for all the other spaces. So not including the apparatus space, all the other spaces are 1.35. And I end up with a gross square footage of a building, which is about 23,500 square feet. That would satisfy all of the apparatus bay needs, all of the administrative needs, all of the office needs, all of the computer mechanical needs and equipment needs for a Bridgewater Fire Headquarters. But I'm talking about a Station 2, Station 3 solution. There's additional apparatus that would be at Station 3. There's some additional personnel needs if you make a Station 3, similar to Station 2. But they'd like to supplement Station 3 with having things such as a training classroom, community meeting room for the west side of town, things that Station 2 doesn't have right now. But they'd like to supplement at some time and bring a training classroom to Station 2. But this explains that Station 2 and Station 3 are substations of similar needs to service Bridgewater. Now, they're not going to have similar apparatus stuff. We'll go and I'll explain what apparatus will be at each station. But this brings an additional net square footage of 11,905. We did the net to gross multiplier the same way. So there's 14,850 of gross square footage for a west side solution or Scotland solution, or if you want to call it just Station 3. If we were to find one site, then the 23,490 is in addition to the 14,850. So that's putting both of these facilities in one location. The site's going to determine whether that's possible. And if it does combine, we'll probably have more savings than that as far as combination, because some of the other things might be able to get reduced, like combined mechanical systems might not be this number. We'd only have one physical training room instead of building two at each location. Things like that would probably start to consolidate a little more. So this is worst case scenario. So how did we get to 23,490? Again, I'm going to back up a little bit. And I'll go to page 5. You saw 880 square feet for public. If you want to get into the weeds of the space needs assessment, what I asked the fire personnel is, what do you need? It's a vestibule, it's a public lobby, and it's public restrooms. That's all of the components of public that they need at headquarters. The descriptions are all described because this station would probably be or possibly be not manned at certain times or certain activities of the fire department. So the intercom, the vestibule is going to have an intercom and it's going to have an auto dial to dispatch. This may be the only location the public can get to when there's nobody occupying the fire headquarters. If there's somebody there, they could get to a lobby and have access to fire prevention offices or clerical and all the descriptions of the lobby. They want to put their antique fire apparatus within the lobby as a focal point. Some of these are just specific to Bridgewater. And public toilets, public toilet rooms to meet the needs of the public, but also meet the needs because they're looking to get a training classroom, community meeting room, EOC, to seat 100 at chairs at a training classroom. So this is the description and the detailing that you're going to see throughout the space needs assessment. And you total up 120, 400, and 360. That's where you get the 880 that you saw in the summary sheet. So 880 square feet of net square footage is devoted to public. I'm not going to spend a lot of your evening talking about all of this, but you have availability to see this. I just want to describe the major components of what's in the training classroom. Obviously, I'm going to go through this quickly. I'm here all night if you want to ask questions. I'll happy to go through it in a lot of slow motion if you'd like, but let me go through just the major categories. Training classroom, EOC, community meeting room. These are typical for fire headquarters, typical for community use. It is an emergency operations center if you need it for that use. It's community meeting room if you need it for community space or outreach. Training supply storage would support the training needs of the department. Supply storage would be storage for supplies, kitchen supplies, sound equipment. All of these, both of these would be right off of the training classroom. The fifth item on the list is medical exam room. This is a personal exam space. They do have people coming to the fire headquarters needing attention. People could come up needing medical attention. They would just drive to the facility. They need a place for people to come and have medical exam and have confidentiality and privacy when they're being tended to. So it's a 75 square foot room. It's just 8 by 10, adjacent to the training classroom in the lobby for that use. The emergency management director would have an office adjacent to the training classroom also for emergency management needs of the town of Bridgewater. Fire prevention office would be an office for 2 fire prevention inspectors. Clerical workstation for 1 to support fire prevention. And then an interview room could be used for interviewing, could be used for plan review, could be used for fire prevention needs. And it would also be off of the clerical workstations for fire prevention. Administrative offices would include fire chief, assistant chief, a shift deputy's office, training EMS office, executive assistant, conference room for 10 to 12 people, a workroom for equipment and small kitchenette, and then toilet, shower, and lockers. This is toilet, shower, and lockers within the administrative area for administrative use. Other firefighters would have access to toilet, showers, and lockers. This would just be for 4 storage lockers, toilet, sink, and shower for single occupancy use in the administrative area. We're up to number 9, watch room, dispatch. They are currently doing fire dispatch. We've combined that with a watch room because there's future conversations about how dispatching may be continued. It's anticipated that fire dispatch will remain with the headquarters, but if it does not, they still have need for a console position. They still have needs for radio frequencies to and from the facility. So this would be for PD, DPW, mutual aid frequencies that still need to come into the headquarters. So we'll have one console and utilize this for kind of a radio room. That also has a toilet because if they're using it for dispatching, they need a dedicated bathroom for dispatchers to use without leaving the dispatch area. Equipment storage room is just that. Roll call is just that. It's training table for 12. Supervisor's workstation for use in roll call. An office for the tour commander. And firefighters functions. For this, it's a day room, kitchen, dining, which is a combined room. It's seating for 8. It's furniture, living room furniture. It's a kitchen with full kitchen facilities. Ice machine, dining table for 12 to 15. It's really the heart of the station. This is where the magic happens right here for the day shifts in the day room. There's also a study room. The study room is if you want to get away for quiet study. This would be, some firefighters are here also doing research, also in school, also needing to have a quiet space to do their own personal research, or if they're doing stuff for the department. It's also labeled here as a future lieutenant's office. So instead of making a separate office with nobody in it, they are seeing the potential that they could have a lieutenant, and the study room would be converted to a lieutenant's office if that need arose, because study is also possible within bunk rooms. So that was why it's a study room / future lieutenant. Other firefighters' functions are bunk rooms. The way that bunk rooms are being designed now, they're individual spaces. No longer are you gang bunking in rooms. So we have 1 bunk room for an officer, and we have 7 bunk rooms for firefighters and EMS personnel. They also have access to restroom showers, but the way these are being designed is why we have 8 bunk rooms. They will have access to 4 restrooms and showers. So again, these are rooms where firefighters, EMS can go into these rooms, lock the door, and then they have their own toilet, shower, and changing area. They would vacate the room, leave it unlocked, available for the next person to go in and use. So we have 4 restroom showers for 8 bunk rooms. This keeps the flow moving, and personnel have access to whatever room is available at the time. Property lockers for firefighters. Lockers could be out in public spaces. So these property lockers would be outside of the bunk rooms. They would be able to store personnel property, bring it to their bunk room for changing, bring it to the showers or restrooms for changing. But the lockers are not intended to be your typical changing locker rooms. But they are sized for the needs of fire personnel. And we have a total of 32 at headquarters. And this handles all the shifts going through and all of the anticipated firefighters, EMS. Physical training room is a typical feature. It's included here. And then apparatus bays. 3 double deep apparatus bays would satisfy headquarters. We've looked at what apparatus that is, and I can get into specifics when I move a little bit further into the beginning of the report. In addition to personal lockers, we have turnout gear lockers. Turnout gear is your firefighter's equipment. That also wants to be adjacent to the bays. And we have 32 gear lockers specific to gear. Cascade room would be storing of bottles and oxygen bottle inventory, but it's also a cascade fill station for air packs. Typical. Decontamination washer dryer room, typical for a fire station. General storage, you can't get enough of it. Always need more. The bigger the better. But this is all of the equipment that's listed for general storage. Gear supply storage is a smaller room for protective clothing. This is spare helmets, spare parts, spare whatever they have, they can store it and maintain it. Hose storage, maintenance room for working on parts and pieces. So that maintenance room has an adjacent part storage for what they need for both apparatus and equipment. Medical supply storage is a controlled environment and controlled area for EMS to control the medications and supply inventory that they have for EMS. And then a bathroom, which is just a unisex bathroom off the apparatus bay. That's 16 of the components, which is very specific to firefighting. 17 is custodial services, which are janitorial closets. Mechanical space is just what it describes. Computer data room is just containing all of your radio equipment for dispatching, all of your data needs, all of your telephone needs. And it's a climate controlled room for computer data, but it's computer / communications equipment, all within one location. Circulation needs, these are stairs and elevators, but we're looking at a 1 floor, it could be a 2 floor. So if there's an elevator need, we're seeing that this may or may not need to be included, but there's no square footage because this is within your net to gross calculations. This is what I talked about before, going from a net square footage to a gross square footage. And then equipment storage bays, they have 3 additional indoor storage bays for fire vehicles, trailers, and bulk supplies. This is, again, wanting to get equipment that they own inside. In addition to apparatus, these are additional vehicles and trailers and supplies that they want to get inside. So that's headquarters. Now, what goes over to Station 3? You might think we've taken care of it all. Again, if we were to build a West Side Station, they have similar public needs, just a little smaller, because the public toilet room at the substation is just one handicapped accessible unisex public restroom. It's no longer a male and a female. So it just gets a little smaller. The training classroom, only seating for 15. So this is really training, has less to do with community meeting room. Although if there's a community meeting room that only needs 15 people, it's available. But this is more for just the personnel that are at that substation for their training needs. So it's seating for 15, furniture storage, AV storage, supply storage. Still, if they have a drive up, it's a medical exam room at that location. The watch room and dispatch, again, even though they're not dispatching, they have radio equipment, they have dispatching, they have a need for radio communications. At this location, you don't have the bathroom off of this room because this would not be fire dispatch. This would just be radio access for radio needs. So we don't have a restroom off of this one. It does have a supervisor's office for the rank of lieutenant. Does have firefighters functions for personnel, a study room, which could be a future office here. Bunk rooms, we're down to 1 and 5. 3 restrooms and showers, a smaller physical training room. And for this substation, 2 double deep bays are required. So that would be handling apparatus at this location. 28 lockers for turnout gear, cascade room, decontamination, storage, similar things off the maintenance, off the apparatus bays, custodial closets, mechanical space. They also have computer equipment for radios, circulation, and instead of indoor vehicle storage, vehicle carport shelter for 8 vehicles. This is actually included in the square footage that you saw for the substation, but it's a shelter. It's not an enclosed vehicle storage. It would just be giving them shelter from anything above. So that's how we drive all of the numbers that you see here for headquarters and how we drove the numbers for Station 3. As I said, I'm doing this all in reverse order. Let's go look at the fire apparatus. How did we get the numbers that we drove for the numbers? For fire apparatus, we look at 2020. This is what they have currently. Currently, or 2020 estimated is if they have distribute the apparatus that they have for fire headquarters, which are 8. Pratttown Station, Station 2 has 5, and they would envision a similar 5 going to the Scotland Station. So it's not that they're going to go out and buy all these additional vehicles. They have these vehicles. It's now they're distributing them across 3 facilities. So the tower truck and the aerial would be nothing at Scotland, but it would be designed to have one in 2040. The tower and the aerial right now would be at headquarters. There's no tower and no aerial at East Side. They just have an engine, an ambulance, a pickup truck, and 2 utility trailers. If they went to Station 3, it would be an engine, an ambulance, a pickup truck, a utility trailer, and then they would put the boat over there. So it's a similar distribution on both sides, east and west, with some additional support of ambulances going to 2 for headquarters. Engine pumper trucks would just be maintained at 1, tower truck maintained at 1, and then pickup utilities. This antique fire apparatus, this is what they were going to be liking to see in the lobby. If they could feature that in the lobby. If I'm looking at fire personnel, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because 2020, there are no personnel on the West Side Station. Right now, they have 33 at headquarters. And right now, they have 20 at Pratttown. Now, this is cycled. This is what they're doing for rotations and what they're doing for shifts. So it's not that you're going to walk into the Station 2 and see 20 people there. But they have to rotate, and they have to rotate shifts, and they can rotate a squad, and that squad will have 16 assigned to it over rotations at Station 2. So if you take a similar concept, Station 2 remains the same all the way out to 2040. In the same concept, that same 21 personnel would have to eventually be supported somehow on the west side, where you're taking 33 and going to 42 because of an extra shift potentially at fire headquarters. So when we're looking at all of this in a generalized way, I can take apparatus and distribute apparatus. But the town has to realize that if I'm distributing apparatus, there will be an impact on staffing. Because now, just as you've developed the staffing level at Station 2, you're going to have to commit to a similar staffing level at Station 3 to support that, in addition to what we're seeing for headquarters. Calls for service. We got statistics back to 2003, and calls for service in 2003 were just over 3,000 calls for service. That's from 2003 to 2019, you've seen it jump to just over 4,700 calls for service. There's a demand in Bridgewater that's seeing an increased calls for service. And we've had discussions how that calls for service are impacted by the west side also. We're seeing the potential here for Bridgewater of up to 7,500 calls for service. And how are you going to handle that in a long-term solution? We're seeing population growing, getting to a 2040 population projection of just 28.6, where you're at about 27.8 now. While development happens in a different ways, populations one, business development, commuters in and out of Bridgewater, Bridgewater State University, the prisons, these are all generating traffic in Bridgewater. These are all generating service calls because the fire department does respond to Bridgewater State and provide services to them also. So we're seeing a lot of things that are increasing. In the fire department calls for service, I did indicate Bridgewater State College is 2010 and 2019, you're just over, just under 7% or just over 6% of your calls are related to Bridgewater State. We're still projecting that out at about a 7 to 8%, meaning 600 calls for service are going to just Bridgewater State College on a yearly basis. On a similar manner, MCI Bridgewater is generating just under 6% of your calls currently. So we're at about 6.5 to 7% into the future. So there's over 1,100 calls for service anticipating that might jump and also be a need for what we're showing in the space needs assessment. General information is just thanks to the deputy chief. Thanks for the chief for being my go-to contacts for completing this. Fire headquarters right now is just over 8,000 gross square feet. Your station 2 is just over 7,000 gross square feet. So you're seeing now a need to go from 8,000 to 23.4. So that's almost 3 times the size of your headquarters. Why is that? It's because headquarters is the way it is, and everybody I think can understand it. It's just not working. It's not working at all. So if you are going to do it, what is it that you need to do? So I went in reverse. This brings me back to page 1. You've seen what's included, throughout the report. There's a lot of things to digest. The only thing I didn't show you is the exterior considerations. We're still putting together some estimates on total number of parking for public, parking for staff, but this gets less to do with square footage and more to do with site considerations. And I think the site's going to help dictate some of that. And that's the end of our space needs assessment. You tell me when I can take draft off of this, and I'm waiting for any comments, or I'm waiting for the town to say I'm approved to get to the next step, which is site evaluation. So I turn it back to you, and I'm here for any questions.
I guess I would open it up. Brian, thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation on the details in the report. I have a number of questions and concerns, but I just open it up to first start with members of the fire department, the chief and deputy, their thoughts on what you've produced for the town and whether or not they're in agreement with it. And then I'd like to transition to some members of the fire department who might have been seeing this for the first time, just to get some initial thoughts, and then I'll share with some of my initial thoughts. So, Chief, are you on still?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good, Matt. I thought
Okay.
it was a very, very well thought out, and the description that Brian alluded to, I believe, was very informational, and I think he did a very, very good job trying to describe a very complex project.
Deputy McDermott?
Fantastic job. Appreciate the way you explained it. The only thing I might change is adding to the population counts. That was probably from us not addressing that properly. Will be 300 multi-bed units going online by the spring of next year up at Lakeshore. There'll be another 147 on the east side at Cumberland's property. There'll be another 57 on Borough Ave in Plymouth at a multi-unit facility that's also multi-bedrooms. That goes from 1 to 3 bedroom units in those 57. Same thing on Broad Street, something similar. 4 stories, we heard 68 units, and another 53 on Main Street, multi-bed units. That does not include some of the other developments that have gone on in town, Magnolia, also Oldfield, Timber Lane. That also doesn't include some of the smaller developments. So we might only be a little bit shy on the population with what's going to grow.
Yeah, I thought the numbers were a little bit low. Actually surprised me as well. So we can take another look at it.
With the personnel, we try to stay with increasing growth in the number of responses from 2003 to 2019. I want to say it turned in the increment of 21%. And then, from 2003 to 10 or 11, and then to 19, it was 21%, and then 20%. We try to keep the personnel to match or mirror that as far as the run volumes and the calls. But it was more difficult to adjust personnel when you have 3 stations from 2 stations. It's easier when it's centrally located, but when you start to spread out, it requires more personnel when you open more stores.
Thank you. Anything else?
Dispatch, one of the things that was brought up was at some point, if we did have to go to a dispatching system, that we would have to address that with a camera monitoring system. You know, that was one of the first things that was brought up, but we figured we'd prepare for the future. The last station we were in had horses in it, so we hope we don't get to rocket ships by the time we're done.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Does any member of that's on here from the fire department, particularly, you know, Jimmy, if you see anything from a union perspective that I'd like to try to incorporate now before we take the next step, any major concerns?
You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Brian, excellent job. Great presentation. Really good job getting together with Tommy and Mike on this and get the numbers together. One question for you, Brian. I'm just curious, seeing that we're talking in a 3-station format, do you have any type of response times from us right now, like from headquarters or from Station 2, just to correlate with the fact that it takes us a long time to get to the west side from where we're at due to medicals or fire or any like that? I didn't know if you had any, if you need any info like that, if we can help you with that and add that to this draft. Everything else is spot on so far. It's just, I don't know if this would put a little more meat on the bones, if you will, if we had response times.
We didn't incorporate response times other than discussions that we had with the chief, stating that there is a need over there and the response times would be improved if they had a facility over there. Getting a whole report done on response times is another expense that's not part of my feasibility study. There are companies that are out there doing that, but it wasn't included as my scope in the feasibility study. So we just had general conversations about it. There's been no scientific or calculated data that I have.
And I got 2 more questions for you, Brian. One other on a union perspective is there's no, like in these station locations and everything, there's no interest in putting any type of cell phone towers near like sleeping quarters, anything like that?
No, the only tower that we've talked about is the radio needs. No cellular, no leased towers. That hasn't been part of the conversation.
Okay, just due to what we're hearing with people building stations throughout the international, there's been issues with related to cancer with
Right.
property and cell phone towers. Another question for you is HVAC units, there's been some issues with new buildings with, having, mold issues, stuff like that. Is this mostly going to be a forced hot air HVAC unit? And what have you guys done now to move forward to make sure that process doesn't happen, with what's going on with new buildings?
Well, what we've done is follow the codes. I think the codes have really come up to speed on a lot of that, requiring some very tight buildings, but also introducing outside air. This is not something that just we do. It's something that the code mandates. So whatever system you put in, whether it's a forced hot air, whether it's a VRF, whether heat pumps, there's still a requirement for fresh air. And that fresh air requirement is specified in the codes and gives you a tight building, but it also gives you a healthy environment inside.
Thank you, Brian. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
And I think, Jimmy, too, we're dealing with the elementary school construction and looking at, we're at the final sort of budgeting process, I guess you'd say, so to speak, and looking at HVAC, equipment. So there will be options on the table depending on cost. So there's the code, and then there's going above and beyond that. We're talking about ultraviolet light on HVAC systems, especially, with everything that's going on in COVID. So we kind of get those breakdown costs, and as we reach a budget ceiling, that's where some of the tough decisions have to start to be made, but certainly take that into consideration. I think all of us as a town, the chief, the deputy, I'm sure I'm speaking on their behalf, and certainly in my own profession, safety is number one. I don't want to build any new fire station that the firefighters are uncomfortable with day one walking in. This is really why you're on the committee, to just get that perspective. So, at least an assurance from me, safety is number one, and you'll see that in terms of even the elementary school being built. So I appreciate your comments, and they'll be obviously taken into consideration the whole time.
Thank you.
So any other questions from anyone on the fire department? And then we'll move to just committee members.
Just real quick. I thought the presentation was very well done. I picked up on the same point that Deputy McDermott did about the population of the town. I would agree that with the massive building on both the far ends of the west side and the far end of the east side, I would expect the overall population to be higher than that. I guess my big question, which will probably be answered in phase 2, the site assessment, what are the actual chances or probability of this town building 2 stations at the same time? Because I do think it would make a big difference as far as what you're going to build. And I guess whatever we come up with, the location would make a big difference for that. My only thought.
I think your final thought is right. I think once we start looking at available sites, that answer might actually be given to us. The sites are going to dictate what the final solution is. If we can fit it all on one site, that's great. But if that one site is toward the east side of downtown, it really doesn't address west side needs. I don't know what the sites are yet. I haven't looked at any. I haven't been tasked to do that. I think there are some sites that are being considered. I don't know what they are yet. So I think once the sites are looked at and what sites are available, I do think to satisfy the fire service, there has to be a solution that addresses the west side needs. If we can't find that in a site that's going to house everything, then I think that it's going to be the same question. What's the solution? Does it satisfy west side? Does it satisfy downtown? And station 2 is satisfying your east side. So is there a site that satisfies everything, or does it mean 2 sites are selected to satisfy it that way? No question, if you build 2 facilities, you're going to be spending more money than 1 facility. But it's the same way we did the space needs assessment. This is to satisfy fire service in Bridgewater for the next 50 plus years. This is not something that is looking to change, at least for 50 years. You built a facility and you want it to last for 50 years. So this is a solution that's going to be with you for a long time.
Casey, you have anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else on the committee that has any questions for Brian?
Brian, nice presentation and going through it pretty quickly. The only one question I had, on the headquarters, did you say there was a training room for 100 people?
That is correct.
And can either Tom or Mike explain why that's necessary?
I can if you'd like me to answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Well, we did look with the training in that size. We did it for two reasons. One, we could also encompass the EOC at that location, which is currently located at 166 Mount Prospect Street, the old high school. That could be half of that. We made it so the training room could be split into two. We also, for future growth, that could be utilized in that area, where that could be subdivided into other rooms or other spaces and utilized in that way. At the same time, we'd also have the ability with the CERT team. Right now they use one of the schools, and we also recently connected one of the portable, I think it's 200 kVW generator that can go to the senior center. But at the same time, this could also be used in an emergency as a shelter or even for EMS if necessary, depending upon what happened or what transpired. That was one of the reasons for the size.
Thank you. That's all the questions I really have.
If I might add to that, Deputy?
Sure.
Oh, hi, Tim.
Hi, everybody. The space is for 100 chairs. So when
Yeah.
you put tables into that space, whether you're using it for a community meeting room or whether you're using it for a training area, when you put the tables and chairs together, you lose about 60 or 70% of the chairs. So we're looking at a space for tabletops with exercises and regular training that's probably going to be more appropriate for somebody in the 30 to 40 person range.
Thank you, Tim. We appreciate that. I actually was looking at the training room and I thought it was undersized. So it sees where you're coming from. And I hear what you're saying with the 100 chairs. Michael, do you have any questions?
No, Matt, thank you. The only question I'd have is just, Brian, did you do, I can't remember if you did Carver, if that was one of the ones that you had designed.
No, I'm familiar with your Carver Fire Station.
Correct.
I'm familiar with it because we're doing the police station across the street.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been in the Carver training room, and I just didn't know if you had any idea how that sort of compared to what 100 chairs would look
I
like.
think I've been in that classroom and I think it's very similar.
Okay.
It's a very similar sized space. I think you could get 100 people in there in chairs only.
So I guess Matt, the only other question I had is generally, from your perspective, how much, if we were to go for the 3-station option, the three building option, how much space would you be looking for on the west side of town in terms of acreage or square footage?
Well, I calculated, I think the main station's essentially a half an acre physical building. So looking at that, you're talking about at least a quarter acre just for the building, never mind parking lots and whatever. I think the substation calls for an outside shelter, carport.
Yes.
So all in on a west side only station, you'd really be looking at about a couple acres.
Probably an acre and a half.
Okay. And then on the, if you were to do sort of a smaller headquarter building, you'd be looking at roughly how much space, land area?
Maybe 2.5.
Okay.
Wow.
And is it, so you sort of, I'm just sort of guessing, or talking out loud, which is always dangerous. But you'd have if you opted for the 3-station or the 3-building solution, it's really not not particularly feasible to try to phase that in? Or would
Well,
it be?
that's a very good question. It's one that we really had to talk about at some length, because we can't really phase it in for 5 years down the road. The reason being is they're assigning apparatus to that west side solution. So if you're only doing headquarters, you then have to at least build your apparatus bay at headquarters to take all of the apparatus. So you're overbuilding your apparatus bay, only to phase in a station 3 later, meaning you're going to have empty apparatus bays at headquarters at that point.
That makes sense.
So the only way you can really do it, if the site is right, the site satisfies the response times, you're putting all your apparatus in one location, you're overbuilding the headquarters, in essence. You're deferring costs, but your overall costs down the road are going to be higher. Your construction costs would be higher then. You're overbuilding headquarters, only to then supplement it with a higher construction cost for Station 3 down the road. So yeah, it might be ripping the Band-Aid off at this point, but I think your overall construction over time is going to be more cost effective.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. That's helpful.
Brian, I have just a couple of questions. Bear with me. ADHD is kicking in severely tonight, so this is the first time I'm seeing this report. But just to be clear, like moving forward in terms of site selection, we need to approve this somehow as a town as sort of a needs assessment that we've approved. We've agreed with the fire department in principle that this is what their current and future needs are going to look like going out at least to 2040. That would kick off to you a site selection. And really in the site selection process, land really is at a premium, and the real estate market is red hot right now. I think that for us in Bridgewater anyways, site selection is really going to drive the decision whether or not we go to 2 to 3 stations. My initial consumption of this is that the 3-station model also plays a significant impact on personnel. And so I look at the 3-station plan as both construction costs and an investment in personnel right out of the gate as these other 2 stations are built. If we were to get something on 104 and built a larger station, or we determined through site selection, at that point, that's when you would design the physical station moving into schematic design. So really site selection for me is a driving factor in where we're going. Would that make sense to you at all?
I think that makes sense. I think you as a committee and the town have to really understand where this is heading, and ultimately are the voters of Bridgewater willing and able to support this? Because ultimately everybody can have a great idea that ultimately we don't want to just end up on a shelf somewhere. We've got to solve the needs with a physical solution. So whatever that physical solution is, will be driven by sites. We know what the needs are. We know what the ideal solution would be. But if Bridgewater just, you don't feel it, that it's going to get supported as three stations, and there's a feeling that that's not the right dollar to place on the solution, then we do have to fall back into another solution. But I think at least the fire department has stated what the needs are. The needs are a west side presence. And that has to get solved somehow. I'd be happy to get into site evaluation, find the sites, and then continue the conversation as to whether this continues as a three facility option, or whether we put this into a 2-facility solution. And ultimately, you'd be, again, part of that discussion based on what the sites are telling us.
Yeah, and I guess then for my own head, you know, as this document becomes public in this meeting and there's a presentation of the town council tomorrow night, I kind of wanted to have clear direction as to, you know, what is our preferred sort of plan here, you know, the 3-station model or 2-station, but I guess it's probably premature to figure that out until we look at site selection. I don't know if Michael, if you had any input on the 3-station model versus 2.
Me, Matt? Or
Yeah.
Mike McDermott?
No,
I would
sorry.
only say that, you know, I think there are some benefits to a 3-station model. And, you know, I think as everybody here knows, we've had some very preliminary discussions with BSU about potentially doing something jointly with them on some level. So that's really about, you know, where the conversations have gone. Those predated COVID. So, you know, now I know the university obviously is in a challenging place. I don't know if that's true with well, I assume that's true with capital funds as well, but we have had some of those very general conversations. So if I guess it really depends on whether or not we've got a willing partner when it comes to constructing. Presumably, it would be a downtown, you know, headquarters, not a West Side station. But if we've got a willing partner who's willing to do something with us, you know, based on a downtown headquarters, then yeah, a 3-station solution obviously gets much more attractive. If that conversation either, you know, falls apart or just can't go anywhere for a variety of reasons, then it may be more beneficial for us to look at a 2-station solution and do something more substantive on the west side of town. So I think that, you know, once we begin to do a little bit of site research, I think those conversations probably with BSU really need to pick up, and we really need to sort of nail down, you know, what their plan is going to be over the not too distant future. So that's a good way of saying don't know.
I guess the only thing, so what I'm hearing from you though, essentially what we've determined is that the town is in need of a 3-station model unless we can come up with an alternative. That is really the plan.
I think that would, honestly, at this point, that would be my focus. To the extent that I expend my energy and time, I'm going to expend it, you know, seeing if we can figure out a way to do something jointly with BSU on some level. And you know, Brian's work here gives me, you know, some data and some numbers to be able to, you know, reinitiate that conversation as well. So that's really helpful.
Okay. So I guess that's actually all the questions that I really have. Everybody kind of spoke to things that popped up, including the population and whatnot. So I don't think that there's anybody else. I'm not sure if Brian, you have anything else to add?
No, I'm kind of in a holding pattern. I'm happy to make adjustments as you feel appropriate. This ultimately is your document. And I think I said that even before I got hired. This is your document. This describes your facility, your needs, your fire station, your fire service response. I've just helped you get to that point in the conversation and given you the data that you need going forward. But whatever this says is going to really form the basis of everything else going forward. As we said, site evaluation is going to really be a key to this. And then it's whatever you tell me to design as far as floor plans is going to be coming back to this space needs assessment. If it's in the space needs assessment, it should be on the floor plan. There's no room for error there. You've asked for it, we should provide it.
Excellent. I don't have anything else unless anybody else on the committee has any other additional questions. Maybe Tim?
I'd like to add one more thing, is if we separate the stations by a considerable distance, meaning if we combine headquarters and a potential future Station 3 farther towards the west side of town, we need to decide where we're going to place the tower truck at that point in time, because we have tall buildings, unfortunately, both in the east and in the west, and in the downtown district, we have some significant buildings to try to protect as well. And if we separate the tower truck from the college or from the east side of town significantly by placing it on the west side or near about west side station, our response times to that side of town are going to increase significantly with the tower truck. And I mean, the consideration of buying another aerial is not a cheap consideration. It's, you know, we're talking about a 1.6 or $1.7 million piece of apparatus in nowadays money. So other things to consider that we hadn't talked about yet tonight.
The other thing with the tower truck, that's not just an aerial platform. That is all the equipment that entails. That can be from extrication to ventilation. It can't just be considered a tower truck. It's not just a big ladder on a truck.
Yep, good point. Thank you.
Matt, I have one more question. Brian, have you seen any studies that would sort of kind of project where firefighting is going to go? I mean, I often point out to folks that, you know, 50 years ago, nobody imagined that you know, firefighting would really turn into a medical, you know, emergency medical services. Obviously, that's a huge portion of what they do now. They do it, you know, it's perfectly situated. They do it very well. Do you see any trends for the future that we should be aware of or we should be planning space for now?
I think what we have seen for trending, we've incorporated into the needs assessment. Some of that is just increased female participation in firefighting. Now we have male and female facilities being provided, where if you were doing this 20 years ago, you'd just be doing a male-only facility. So you're seeing more female participation. We are looking at this COVID condition as being a temporary condition. We're not taking the reaction that everything needs to be designed to COVID right now, but the fire department's already taken standards for decontamination and protection, and EMS has certain precautions in place handling any pandemic. So we're not saying that this COVID is going to be a permanent design solution, but it's more of a temporary condition. By the time you get this facility designed and occupied, we're hoping that COVID's a thing of the past.
Let's hope before that.
But I do see that in the number of major structure fires is going down and fire prevention is going up. But then the need to get involved with the elderly population, the fire department is very much getting involved with elderly populations right now. And we're seeing that the populations are getting to be more elderly in communities. So that's also going to increase calls for service for fire/EMS needs for elderly population, where it wasn't a while back. The elderly population was not a big impact on fire stations, but now it is.
Is that just aging baby boomers?
That's a positive. I'd like to comment on that if you don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Humes. The National Fire Academy is pushing towards a more all hazards management concept for the fire service in the future. So basically, it's kind of what we do now. We fall under the fire umbrella, but we do everything. The EMS Agenda 2050 came out earlier this year, and without boring you with the rules of that document, it's a big push just to what he was talking about. It's about community risk reduction. It's about risk management for the community as a whole, as well as all the other responses, fire and EMS, that we've been doing. Community risk reduction is a really big part of it. The education component, the safe in schools, the elderly, the senior safe program that we're already running, and expanding that to do other other areas, including med checks and possibly community EMS or community paramedicine. Both are programs that are in trial now in the state, and they seem to be working pretty well.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on Tim's basis too of community paramedicine. So it's obviously going to be our bread and butter coming up in the future. And obviously you had a lot detailed in your plans for stations and training facilities and EMS rooms. And it's definitely the direction that we're heading. You know, obviously we're still firefighters at heart too. And we still do structure fires, and, you know, they're burning faster and at a greater rate. So that's what I would like to just add to that. It's just the fact that the current building situation, just to throw this out there, Michael, is that the lake shores, these new fast houses that are going up, they're not they're not built to burn. These houses, these communities, these apartment complexes, they're, I mean, in a rapid rate. You can see videos on YouTube. I think New Jersey and Philadelphia just had a scenario where these buildings that are built exactly like Lakeshore Drive are fully involved when people are just showing up. So the problem that we're seeing is rapid fire growth. So, I mean, where the 3-station concept would be perfect in my eyes is just response times. Just getting people there, getting people out, life safety. But yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Can I comment on that, Jimmy, if you don't mind? So I agree with you 100%. Jimmy's absolutely correct. The lightweight wood truss construction that we're utilizing for almost all residential and many commercial structures now, it burns a lot faster and not necessarily hotter, but it generates more BTUs in megawatts per second as opposed to kilowatts per second of the fires of old. And the current flashover time. Flashover is the time during a structure fire when the room and contents ignite and the entire atmosphere is a complete fireball. It's untenable, it's unsurvivable. Those times are happening within 5 to 7 minutes, usually always under 10 minutes in a lightweight wood constructed home nowadays. And the contents of the homes are contributing to that. So the fires of yesteryear, when my dad was a firefighter and our grandfathers were firefighters, it was typically Class A combustibles, meaning the flashover time was around 20 minutes, 25 minutes, which people had time to get out of the buildings at that point. We had time to get into them and extinguish them before we had a vent-limited fire, and we were constrained by the amount of BTUs in megawatts that the fire is producing, so that as soon as we open the front door and we put air, we entrain air into that vent-limited fire, we're causing flashover in many cases. And it's not survivable for the occupants, and it's extremely dangerous for the firefighters. Oftentimes firefighters are stepping into the front door of a newly constructed home, and they take a few steps and they fall through the floor because the floor is burned through in the lobby, in the foyer of the home, which it wasn't like that years ago. The firefighting is different now than it was 30 years ago. And we have to, and all of that unfortunately centers around response times. We cannot get into these buildings in 3 to 4 minutes to start cooling the fire before the building starts to degrade to the point where we cannot make it. Those are scary facts of modern firefighting. And I hope that every single firefighter today understands that. And unfortunately, we have to teach the public that's the reality of fighting fires in today's buildings. They burn much quicker. The structures aren't there. There's very little mass to a building today. If you were to weigh a home today, when compared to a 50, 60-year-old home from now, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds in different weight, not to mention the glues and polymers and plastics that are involved in them and all that. So just something to ponder.
Could I just ask, is there a calculated average response time, both like a national standard versus, or is there, if there is there one known in Bridgewater currently?
Go ahead, Mr. McDermott.
No, go ahead, sir.
I would say that there is a national standard. It's NFPA standard. We should be trying to be on scene in 6 minutes from notification. Usually that's 7 to 8 minutes from the time of ignition, sometimes a little more. But that's our goal, is to always be there in that short amount of time to try to get that fire at the incipient stage where we can actually affect it with small hand lines. Otherwise, we can't overcome the BTUs being generated by the fires of today with our hand lines. We cannot overcome the BTUs. It'll just evaporate the water into steam, and we have to put bigger and more hand lines on it, which takes more and more time in order to get those in place.
I'm sorry.
Most of the buildings that we were just talking about, you can look at it right now. Burrell and Plymouth, those are built with lightweight polymer construction, also truss as far as support. What was usually a 2x12 solid piece of lumber is now 2x4s gang nailed together with gusset plates. Anywhere between under fire load, 5 to 8 minutes before it's untenable. So that means when you used to be able to go onto a roof and vent, this will self-ventilate, but at the same time collapse upon you or the occupants of the building. So that time space we were talking about, one of the questions that came over, and I'm sorry that I didn't answer it earlier, but one of those questions for the response times, that would be the primary reason for 3 stations, would be to cut down on those response times. The pinch points we have in Bridgewater is similar to, I think they did a traffic study committee for Southeastern Mass. We were the second worst, and that was from Route 104 South all the way to Route 24. And even with the school being out right now and work traffic down, it's still a challenge to get out to 24 and 495. But we're expanding our Western Business District, Elm Street. We built all the infrastructure around it, i.e. roadways, drainage, electrical, water. This is one of those times we have to seriously look to add for the service that we provide. Another avenue we're pursuing is the code enforcement. That is an assistance. It does help. And it allows us to get in prior to, it allows us to do walkthroughs so we can see the unsafe things, change them, and or understand them for response.
Thank you. I'm just not, anyone have like a time in Bridgewater, what that looks like?
Western part of the community map on a good day is 7 to 8 minutes. Eastern part from Station 2 is within 5 to 7, the furthest points. And then center, if you're feeding out from the center to the east, you should have response already there unless they're doing multiple calls.
Okay, I just wanted to add too, Carlton at some point had typed any reason not to put a headquarters at number 2 and build number 3 on the west side, or all 3 locations for equipment the best option, assuming 2 new sites, would this be a phased build or concurrent? And Carlton, just to answer that is, hopefully you've gotten that answer, but that is something we're trying to figure out. And I think that right now it appears that site location is going to be a major contributor to what the plan looks like. And I guess, so I don't have any other questions. Brian, we could probably sit here all night talking about this. But I think that the needs are the needs. This is what Bridgewater needs. You know, certainly with the input of the fire department, they're the professionals. They know what they need to service the town. They do a great job. And so we're going to work to try to make that happen. And hopefully we can move very quickly to that site selection. I have a few ideas myself, but I would certainly encourage all of the committee members. I'm not sure if Michael wants to collect those, but you know, emails in terms of site locations that you may be aware of that are potential sites that we could kind of put into a list to get to that next phase and keep this project moving forward. I think that's the biggest thing I'd like to see, is just progress.
I got one last question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You know, I agree with what all the other gentlemen were saying about 3 stations would be best fit. As far as the finances and the debt exclusion, is there a contingency plan if that vote were to fail?
Let's see. Can you hear? Yeah, not at this stage, Casey.
Okay.
So it's obviously there's a lot more work to do just to get us through the feasibility stage. So part of that, from my end, not necessarily Brian, because Brian doesn't know the community as well as we do. But there's a lot more work to do. To introduce the concept of just a new fire station generally to the town. I don't think there's anybody that really understands and knows the condition of the state of the headquarters right now that would deny that, yeah, we got to do something. But there are a lot of people in town that have no idea. So we have to remember that those people are out there. So we're going to have more discussion, obviously, on a 2-station, a 3-station concept, and then we'll bring some of those conversations out to the public that, aren't involved in the day-to-day specifics. But in terms of a contingency plan for that, it's probably too early for that. But when the time comes, yeah, we're going to have to, because clearly something has to happen with Station 2 or station headquarters rather. And we can't wait too many years to make something happen. So
Yeah, I mean, not to get ahead of ourselves, but I would just, I agree that 3 stations would be functionally better. I would just hate to see us go for 2 brand new stations and come up with nothing.
yeah, no, that's a good point.
Michael, can I ask you a question real quick about downtown? A question about how feasibility for, I know you guys are really putting your heads together for revitalizing downtown. Is there a window that you guys are looking at, like year-wise, that we would miss the boat on something federally or any type of funding that, because obviously we're in a tough spot. We're in the middle of the downtown. So I'm just curious on that question.
That's a great question. In terms of, I think everybody here knows that our downtown was, well, the east side of Central Square where the fire station sits is part of what's called an opportunity zone, which is essentially a zone a federal zone that was created to allow investment, private investment into the opportunity zone at a beneficial capital gain tax rate. So there really isn't anything we're going to miss the boat on, but we want to make sure that a private developer or private entity who wants to put money into the opportunity zone is aware of some of the deadlines and when that developer can maximize their use of the capital gain tax break. And I think Congress extended that. The most beneficial year it was 2019. I think it's been extended out. I'm not sure to exactly when, but it's mostly a benefit to the private developer. So, but quite honestly, in this case, if there's a benefit to the private developer that we can leverage and we can, negotiate some sort of development agreement that allows the use of the property where the fire station is, then there's a benefit that comes back to the town and presumably comes back to fund some portion of the new fire building project. So those are kind of all the little pieces that begin to try to fit together on a project like this, which is not which is a little more complex than most. I mean, most towns, Carver, only because I've been in that station, that's an easy one. There's a piece of property, we need a new station, people vote new station, we build a new station. In Bridgewater, the fire station is right in the middle of the opportunity zone. That adds a quirk. We have there's certainly a possibility of negotiating some kind of development agreement with a developer who's willing to offset the cost of a new fire station on a different piece of property yet to be identified. So those are, BSU is certainly, potentially part of the mix. So there are a lot of moving parts to this fire station rebuilding possibility, which is not a bad thing. I think it's kind of a challenging thing, and it's kind of exciting to see if we can get as many of these things to fall into place as possible. But it's more work than just oh, there's a piece of land, we're going to build a fire station there. But that's too easy. We don't like too easy in Bridgewater.
Of course not. Thank you for answering my question, Michael.
Nope, my pleasure. It's a good question.
And I just wanted to add, I'm not a favor of contingency plans. It only it opens up the avenue for a cheaper plan, which is typically not the plan that you originally planned for. And so I look at this assessment as what the fire department needs. There's really no way of getting around it. There's only going to be obstacles, in my opinion. That's, the land issues and trying to find the right location. But I think we're in a good spot right here to move forward. And as far as the downtown, I think from the town council's perspective, I'm not speaking for all of us, but at least myself, this is part of a bigger plan to really hopefully revitalize downtown and mitigate traffic concerns in the center. You know, there's a number of plans and studies that have been done. I think the fire department is a critical component to getting the ball rolling to improving downtown. So, you know, there's motivation for a number of reasons beyond the fact that you need them, that this plan should go. And I certainly envision a subcommittee being formed of communication once we have a more defined plan. To Michael's point, I don't think there's more than 5% of Bridgewater's community that realize the conditions that you're working in currently. You know, being in public safety and working with you guys as long as I have, I was floored when I walked through the place. So I think that we have a lot of benefits on our side. I think there's probably insurance reductions that could help in building a new facility. So there's things that we could argue to the community that would offset the cost and tax increases. And in the end, really the right thing to do that's long overdue. It's part of our society and community to, you know, pay for what it takes to provide a decent level of service, the best service from the fire department. So in any case, it's going to be game time. And other than that, I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much, Brian. I really appreciate it. I'm sure Michael will be in touch as we sort of narrow down and get ready to move to sort of the second step.
Thank you.
Welcome. Anyone want a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
And a second? Perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
thank you very much.
Josh, if we all say aye, you don't have to do a roll call, do you?
Actually, let me just do a roll call real quick.
No problem.
Matt,
Yes.
Norman,
Yes.
Michael McDermott,
Yes.
Casey,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, the motion was approved. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Yes.